I'm going to start out by saying that if you see me up here weaving back and forth, it's not because I went out and had a quick drink before I got up to speak. I wear a particular shoe called MBT. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. And it rocks back and forth. And so there are times where if I turn, all of a sudden I may lurch to one side. I'm always careful of making sure that I get up and when I address my faculty and staff, that I do it very carefully so I don't go lurching up to the podium and making them all wonder what I had been drinking up in my office. So just to give you an insight into, oh, here it is. I'm assuming it's this? Yeah. The whole issue of data management has been a goal of mine for about the last 7 years. I went to Purdue 7 years ago from MIT, and when I got to Purdue, I started talking to all of our department heads. I would go out and say, now what are your challenges? What are you confronting that you're having trouble meeting? And invariably in the sciences and in engineering and even in business and economics and the social sciences, it was data management. They didn't call it data management. They said, we don't know what to do with all this. They used some expletives, data. And then I met with our CIO, the head of our IT department, or the IT at the university. I said, what's your biggest problem? And he said, everybody coming to us and saying, can you manage our data? And his response was no. And I said, oh, we can help with that. And the response I almost always got was this quizzical look from people saying, we don't understand that. We don't understand how the libraries can help us manage data. And it became very clear to me quickly that librarians have been very, very bad about telling people and letting people know what the principles are of library science. People understand by what we do. They see what we do, but they don't understand the concepts, the principles, the theory behind it. And when I describe this to people, all of a sudden a light goes off among researchers in biology or wherever, and they understand that we're the people they've been looking for. And because I tell them, we look at structure, we look at organization, access, retrieval, dissemination. And the only department that I had issues that really challenged me on this was computer science. I was telling last night at dinner that computer science department was my biggest challenge because they kept thinking we were trying to horn in on their area. And when I would talk about metadata, I would see these computer scientists shaking their heads. And afterwards they would say, you don't know anything about metadata. Metadata is our domain. And I said, well, that's a little odd, since basically what metadata is cataloging. And cataloging has pretty much always been seen as being a prerogative or under the purview of librarians. So it took them a while, about 2 years, but they came around. And one day I realized we had really made an inroad when one of my biggest critics in the computer science department came to me and said, would you do a joint appointment with us in the libraries and computer science? We're developing a knowledge management program, and we realize we can't do it without librarians. And I thought, they've seen the light. Unfortunately, when I went and made the presentation to the department, I had to make a presentation to the entire college about what this position would be. I walked into the room, and there was a representative from every one of the departments: physics, chemistry, biology, statistics, math, all of them. And as I was introduced, I noticed the professor from physics started scowling, looking at me. And I thought, wonder why he's so upset. I've never met him. And then I realized this was a Wednesday, and on Monday, we had met with the department, our physics librarian had met with the physics department to cancel all of the print subscriptions for physics. And I thought, he's going to get me. So as I was leaving the room, this professor came running across the room with his hand out to shake my hand. He said, may I shake your hand? And I said, yes, that'll be fine. I'm glad to do that. But can you tell me why? And he said, We never thought about the libraries. The libraries were just this place where they paid the bills, they were nice people, but we just never thought of them. But he said, now that's all we think about is how the librarians can work with us, how they can participate with us in research projects, work with us in teaching, instruction, and information literacy. And he said, are you going to create a library school here? Because we don't have a library school. And I said, no, our librarians are members of the faculty. We're professors of library science. I said, we will bring and interpret library science principles to the needed areas within Purdue. And he said, whatever, we just have to have you. And one other story. As I said, I've been meeting with all the departments. And we had a terrible time trying to set up a meeting with the head of the civil engineering school. And finally, my assistant said, I've got it set up. You're going to meet with her. And I went over to, we always met at lunch, so that I wasn't going to their office and they weren't coming to my office. And nobody usually turns down a free lunch. And so when I sat down with her, she said, Jim, I have no idea why we're meeting. My impression of the libraries are it's full of dusty books with dusty librarians. And I said, oh, you don't know what we can do. By the time she left, she was so excited because her area of research dealt with environmental data for sewers and water systems within cities. And I said, you manage a lot of data, don't you? And she said, oh, yes. I said, you need to talk to our GIS librarian. She and he have now been research partners for the last 4 years. She now says, whatever you need, we will be there to support you. And we're building a new $75 million combined science engineering library. And this engineering school is totally behind us in doing this. So now I'm going to get in here and talk about data. That was kind of a prelude to why I became excited about data. And I have to I have to tell you, I'm a humanist by background. So working with engineering and science has been a real eye-opener. And I think if I had it to do over again, I would do science engineering, probably engineering. Well, data. We all know that there's been a prolific growth. It's the lifeblood now of science and engineering. And someone asked me, how is it that librarians can now become part of the research in science and engineering that we couldn't have done 20 years ago? And I said, it's the computational aspect. We would not have been going into the labs and helping someone do bench science. I mean, we just wouldn't have done it. But the collaboration with the humanists was very strong, where we would help build collections that they were using. We didn't do the same thing for the scientists. We provided access to their literature, but we didn't participate. There was no way we could participate in their research. Now we do. We have over 100 research projects where librarians are members of the research team within various special research projects. Modeling demands massive amounts of data and, of course, funding agency expectations. But the biggest challenge came when the scientists started telling me what their needs were. I said, oh, we can take care of this. It's not a problem at all. That was my humanist background speaking. I had no idea of how complex data management would be within the science and engineering background. No idea. I didn't realize that each researcher would consider how they share their data differently than how another researcher would, how a certain discipline would consider their data as opposed to another discipline. I didn't realize that there was that kind of variability. So what we really set out to do then is, how can we apply a library science principles, discovery, access, reliability, preservation, to data? And for about 2 years, I was like Jeremiah in the wilderness, telling the campus and the university, we've got to get ready. NSF, NIH are going to make requirements. I was on a panel 5 years ago at NSF where we made the recommendation to the National Science Foundation to require data management plans. So we made this wonderful sweeping statement, the NSF accepted it, and then when I walked up to the program director, I said, and who's going to look at these things, and who's going to even know what a data management plan is? And he said, no one, we don't know what it is. So that was 5 years ago. It's taken 5 years. So I finally went to the provost about a year ago and told him, I said, either we get on this thing and start working on data management planning, or I'm going to shut up. I just won't say anything more, because unless the provost gets behind it and the vice president for research, nothing is going to happen. Then all of a sudden in May, when NSF announced the expected requirement for October, the proverbial all hell broke loose. And all of a sudden we were forming task forces, committees, teams. We get around $500 million from NSF at Purdue. And so all of a sudden it had a huge impact. Last year we had one grant of $125 million. And so to run into the possibility that we were not going to comply with NSF expectations was pretty daunting. And we luckily ended up hiring the former director of the NSF, Arden Bement. He stepped down, retired last June. He was formerly a professor at Purdue. He was head of our nuclear engineering department. And he came back to Purdue to run the Global Research Policy Institute. And he spoke at a conference we held last summer. And he's a miner. He has a mining degree from Colorado. So he likes to think in the ways that he would with mining. And he talked about how the data is the raw ore, and then you consolidate the data, I guess that must be smelting, to concentrate, and then you have the final product, the virgin metal. And he uses those analogies to help him think through and helped us think through what it means to conserve a portion of what you